It was a Wednesday evening, and I was sitting in a dimly lit restaurant with my best friends, Sophie and Lena. We were sipping on our drinks, gossiping about the latest buzz in our lives. It had been a while since I'd seen them, and I had forgotten how much I missed these moments. The chatter was light-hearted, and we were catching up on work, love lives, and everything in between. The clink of glasses and the soft hum of background music filled the air, but my mind wasn't completely present. I was distracted, lost in thought about the past, about Sam. Sam. My ex-husband. It had been nearly a year since we officially separated, but there were still moments when I found myself thinking about him. The way he used to make me laugh, the way he could charm me with that smile of his. But those moments were few and far between. Most of the time, I couldn't help but remember the toxic nature of our marriage, the constant fighting, the emotional manipulation, the broken promises. After everything, I couldn't understand why I still felt a strange attachment to him. Sophie, ever the curious one, nudged me playfully. "So, how's life after Sam? Any chance of getting back together?" I chuckled, the sound hollow, like a nervous laugh that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Oh, no way. We're done. Trust me, I'm way past that," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I actually felt. The truth was, I wasn't sure if I was completely over him, but I wasn't about to admit that. Not to Sophie, not to Lena, and definitely not to myself. Lena leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Come on, you can't be serious. What was the last straw with him?" I rolled my eyes. Honestly, it wasn't one thing. It was a million little things. You know, the usual, him not listening, being dismissive, making me feel like I was crazy for feeling anything. We were just, never on the same page. I sighed, shaking my head as I took another sip of my drink. It's like I didn't even matter to him anymore. He just tossed me aside. Sophie raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by my nonchalant attitude. "He tossed you aside?" "Like, literally." I paused for a second, realizing what I had just said. My face flushed slightly, but I didn't backtrack. "Yeah, well, figuratively speaking. He didn't care about me. He was always more focused on his work, his friends, his own selfish needs. I felt like I was just there, like an afterthought. I mean, how else do you explain someone who can just walk away without a second thought?" The words came out more bitter than I intended, but it felt good to vent. I had carried this anger with me for so long that I almost forgot how much it had eaten at me. The worst part was that I had stayed in that relationship for so long, hoping things would get better. But they never did. Lena, ever the skeptic, tilted her head. "Are you sure that's how it happened? Or did you maybe push him away?" I frowned, not liking the direction the conversation was going. "Push him away? Are you kidding me? I gave him everything I had. I tried, Lena. I really did." Sophie raised her hand in mock surrender. Okay, we get it. No need to defend yourself. But come on, you can't tell me there wasn't some part of you that wanted to make it work." I hesitated, my thoughts suddenly clouded with a mix of regret and confusion. Was I lying to myself? Had I really tried everything, or had I given up too soon? But before I could say anything more, Lena chimed in again, making a joke to lighten the mood. "Honestly, you deserve someone who won't toss you around like that. You're better off," she said, throwing an arm around me in a comforting gesture. I laughed, but it felt forced. "Yeah, well, I don't think I'll ever find someone who will toss me around in the right way. You know, in a good way," I added, trying to make light of it. The tension in the air was starting to feel heavy, and I desperately wanted to steer the conversation in a different direction. But just as I finished speaking, I heard a voice from behind me. Is that how you really feel? I turned, and there, standing in the doorway of the restaurant, was Sam. He hadn't seen me in months. We had exchanged a few polite texts here and there, but nothing serious. His face was unreadable, his eyes locked onto mine with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. I froze for a moment, unsure of what to say, unsure of how to react. He stood there, motionless, before his voice broke the silence again. Is that really how you see me? Like, just someone who tossed you aside? The room suddenly felt smaller, as though the walls were closing in around me. I could feel my heart racing. I had never expected him to show up here, let alone overhear my words. The moment Sam's voice cut through the air, my heart stopped. My body froze, my mind scrambling to catch up with the reality of what was happening. For a second, I felt like the world around me had collapsed into silence, and all I could focus on was him, standing there, in the doorway of the restaurant, eyes locked onto mine with an expression I couldn't quite read. It was as if the air had thickened, suffocating me with the weight of the situation. My friends, too, were silent, eyes darting between Sam and me, unsure of how to respond. I tried to breathe, but it felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. My stomach churned. It had been months since we last saw each other, months since the end of our marriage, and here he was, standing in front of me as if no time had passed at all. But there was something different in his eyes now, something more raw, more vulnerable than I had ever seen before. It was like he had been slapped awake from a long, painful slumber, and now, he was awake, fully aware of the weight of his actions. I could feel the heat rising in my face as I tried to process his words. Is that how you really feel? He asked again, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying so much weight that it felt like a blow to my chest. His words hung in the air, suffocating me, and I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched into fists by his sides. For a moment, I couldn't answer. I just stood there, blinking, trying to make sense of everything. Had he really heard me? Had he really been standing there, listening to me talk about how he tossed me aside as if I were nothing? The bitter joke I had made now felt like a dagger to my own heart. I hadn't meant it to be this way. It was just a joke, something I said to ease the tension. But now, seeing the hurt in his eyes, I realized that the joke had carried more weight than I ever anticipated. I didn't mean it like that, I stammered, my voice shaking slightly as I tried to backpedal, unsure of how to handle the situation. But my words seemed inadequate, empty, as if I was trying to put out a fire with a drop of water. I couldn't undo what I had said, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to. The joke was out, and now the air between us was thick with regret and confusion. Sam took a slow step forward, his eyes still fixed on me. The space between us felt vast, even though he was only a few feet away. His presence was overpowering, like a storm that had suddenly swept through the calm of the evening. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just stood there, looking at me as though trying to process what he had heard, what had been said. I thought I meant more to you, he finally muttered, his voice strained, and there was a slight tremor in it that I couldn't ignore. My heart sank. It was like a punch to the gut, hearing him say that. I had never really understood just how much our marriage had meant to him until that very moment. It was a terrible realization, one that made me feel both guilty and angry, because it was a part of me that I didn't want to confront. I wanted to apologize, to explain that I was hurt too, that I was angry at him for leaving me, for not being there when I needed him most. But instead, the words caught in my throat, choking me, because something in me knew that there was nothing left to say. We had said everything already, and now, all that was left was the silence between us. Sam's gaze softened slightly, and for the briefest moment, I saw the person I had once loved, the person I had tried so hard to hold on to for so long. But that person felt like a stranger now, a ghost of a past that no longer existed. He took another step toward me, but his movement was slow, almost hesitant. "Emily," he whispered, his voice breaking the silence again, but this time with something softer, more fragile. I can't believe you think of me like that. After everything we went through. After everything I did." His words trailed off, and I could feel the tension in the room building again, suffocating me. The friends at the table, who had been silent all this time, exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure of how to intervene, unsure if they even should. And then, without another word, Sam turned around and walked out of the restaurant. It was abrupt, as if the conversation had already reached its end, and there was no going back. He didn't look at me one last time. He didn't ask for closure. He simply walked away, leaving me standing there, stunned, and suddenly very, very alone. I stood there, motionless, my chest tight with a strange mix of disbelief and sorrow. Had I really lost him forever? Was this really the end? I stood there, frozen in the middle of the restaurant, as the sound of Sam's retreating footsteps echoed in my ears. The heavy door slammed shut behind him with a finality that made my heart race. The room felt so much quieter now, the noise of clinking glasses and distant chatter suddenly distant, as if I were in a bubble, separated from the world around me. I hadn't even realized that my friends had been watching the entire exchange until Sophie's voice broke through my daze. Are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice laced with concern. She sounded so far away, like she wasn't really in the same room with me. I blinked, coming back to myself. The moment Sam left felt surreal, like I had stepped outside of my body and was watching everything unfold from a distance. I swallowed hard, trying to push down the lump in my throat, the tightness in my chest. I wasn't okay, not at all. But how could I explain that to them? How could I put into words the storm of emotions that had just risen within me? I don't know, I muttered, feeling suddenly small and helpless. I couldn't even meet their eyes. Instead, I stared at the half-drunk glass of wine in front of me, its red hue swirling with every slight movement of my hand. I didn't expect him to show up. Let alone that. Lena frowned, crossing her arms over her chest. "You didn't expect him to show up? You were just talking about him, You didn't think he'd hear you?" I felt my face flush. She was right, of course. I had been talking about Sam so openly, so casually, not even thinking for a moment that he might overhear. But why would he care? Why would he even come after everything that had happened? I had been the one to walk away, the one to draw the line. But then again, I hadn't truly known how deep the wound was, not until I saw that flicker of pain in his eyes. "I didn't think it would hit him like that," I said quietly, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't realize he'd still care. I thought we were both done with each other." Sophie's voice was gentle now, less of a question and more of an understanding. "You know, you two never really had closure. You might think you're over it, but deep down, neither of you really let go." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. She was right again, wasn't she? All these months, I had convinced myself that the divorce was behind me, that I was over the heartache, the loss. But seeing Sam, hearing him speak, something in me cracked open. There was still a part of me that wasn't ready to let go. Not of him. Not of us. I thought I had moved on, I admitted, my voice trembling. But seeing him again, hearing him ask if that's really how I feel, made me realize I'm not as over him as I thought. Lena let out a deep sigh, her expression softening. It's okay. I get it. But you can't keep holding on to this. You need to decide if you want to move forward, really move forward. This thing with Sam. It's not helping you." I nodded, but my mind was far from agreeing. How could I just forget about all the years we spent together? How could I pretend the last 5 years hadn't meant anything? It felt like I was erasing part of myself, part of who I was. I didn't know how to let go of that, even if Sam had walked away. I don't know what to do, I whispered, more to myself than to my friends. What if he's right? What if I really did push him away? What if this is my fault? Sophie shook her head, reaching out to put a hand on my arm. It's not about blame. You can't carry that weight anymore. It takes two people to make or break a relationship. And honestly, from what you've told me, he didn't exactly put in the effort either. I looked up at her, meeting her eyes for the first time since Sam had left. But what if he really does care? What if he wants to fix things? Lena leaned back in her chair, her expression serious now. Then he wouldn't have left like that. You heard him. He didn't come to fix anything. He came to make himself feel better, to get some kind of closure. And you're not his punching bag for that. I took a deep breath, her words sinking in. The guilt that had been clawing at me slowly started to ease. Sam had hurt me, no matter how much I wished it wasn't true, no matter how much I wanted to believe that I had some control over how everything turned out, he had walked away from me. He had left me behind, and now, he was only coming back to stir up old wounds. I couldn't let him do that to me again. I stood up suddenly, pushing my chair back with more force than necessary. You're right, I said, my voice firmer now. I can't keep doing this to myself. I need to move on. It's time. Lena and Sophie exchanged glances but said nothing, sensing that I had made my decision. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain, I had to stop looking back. The past was over, and it was time for me to finally let go. The following days were a blur, a mixture of half-hearted attempts to keep moving forward and moments of quiet reflection. I went through the motions of work, of seeing my friends, but in my mind, all I could think about was Sam. It was impossible to escape the images of that night, the look on his face, the raw emotion in his eyes as he walked out of the restaurant. I spent hours trying to convince myself that I had made the right choice. I told myself over and over again that Sam's departure was for the best, that I was better off without him. But despite my efforts, there was this hollow ache in my chest that I couldn't ignore. The pain was still there, and no matter how many distractions I sought, nothing could fill the emptiness I felt inside. I found myself replaying every moment with Sam in my mind. The good and the bad. I thought about the way we laughed together, the way he used to hold me when I was upset, and even the way he made me feel so loved at times, before it all crumbled. It wasn't just the love I missed. It was the person I had been when I was with him, the person who felt secure, the person who felt like they mattered. But then, the anger would creep in. The bitterness I had buried for so long would rise up, reminding me of the betrayal, of the broken promises. I had spent so many years trying to please him, trying to be enough, and in the end, it had never been enough for him. He had left me, just like that, with no explanation, no closure. I had spent so much time blaming myself, wondering what I had done wrong, but now, I saw things more clearly. The truth was, we had both failed each other. It wasn't just him who had walked away. I had let him. I had allowed myself to get lost in the relationship, to forget about who I was, and in doing so, I had lost my own sense of self. I was sitting in my apartment one evening, staring out the window, when I had the sudden urge to pick up the phone. I wasn't sure what I was doing, but my fingers hovered over the screen as if some unseen force was guiding me. I typed his name in the search bar, my heart racing as I debated whether or not to hit the call button. I hadn't heard from him since that night at the restaurant, and I had convinced myself that I was better off without him. Yet, deep down, there was this lingering curiosity, this nagging question of whether there was still a chance for us, even after everything that had happened. Before I could stop myself, my thumb tapped the screen. The call went through, and for a moment, I could only hear the ringing on the other end. My breath caught in my throat, and a lump formed in my chest. What was I doing? Why had I called him? The phone clicked, and his voice, so familiar and yet so distant, echoed in my ear. Emily. My heart stopped. I hadn't expected him to pick up. I thought he might ignore it or send it to voicemail. But here he was, answering like it was any other day. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say or if I even had the right to say anything at all. My mind was racing, and for a moment, I was paralyzed by the fear of what I might hear. Emily, are you there? He asked again, his voice a little softer now, like he was unsure of where this conversation might go. I started, my voice shaky, but I stopped myself. What was I supposed to say to him after all this time? I hadn't prepared for this moment. Why did you call? His voice was still quiet, but I could sense the tension in it, as if he was waiting for me to explain myself. You're the one who walked away, right? You're the one who decided we were done. I know, I said softly. I needed to hear your voice. There was a long pause, and I could hear the faint sound of him breathing on the other end. I wasn't sure what I expected him to say, but I didn't expect the sadness in his voice when he spoke next. I thought you were better off without me, he admitted, his words heavy with regret. But hearing you say that, I don't know what to do with that. I felt a pang in my chest. There it was, the truth that had been buried under all the anger and resentment. We had both been holding on to so many misunderstandings, so many things unsaid, and now, here we were, finally confronting them. It wasn't easy. It wasn't what I had imagined. But it was real. I didn't mean for it to end like this, I whispered. I thought I could move on, but it's been harder than I thought. And I didn't realize how much I still care about you. There was a silence between us, and for a moment, I wondered if we would ever find a way back to each other. The past was messy, the hurt was deep, and the chances of fixing everything seemed impossible. But then, Sam spoke again, his voice quiet but sincere. Maybe we're both still trying to figure out who we are without each other, he said softly. But maybe that's something we can work on, together. Not now, maybe not today, but I don't know. Maybe there's still something worth saving. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know if we could fix everything, but in that moment, I knew we had taken the first step toward healing. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was hope. I sat there, holding my phone in my hands, as the words Sam had spoken echoed in my mind. There was a lot of uncertainty still hanging between us, a lot of wounds that hadn't yet healed. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again. It wasn't perfect, and I wasn't sure where this would lead, but there was hope. The hope that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild something that felt broken for so long. The days that followed that conversation were a blur of emotions. I spent hours thinking about what Sam had said. His words weren't some promise of a perfect future, but they were a step toward honesty. It wasn't about fixing everything overnight or pretending the past didn't exist. It was about acknowledging the pain, the mistakes, and finally allowing ourselves to admit that we still cared. That we still had unfinished business, even if we didn't know how to deal with it just yet. We spoke again the next week. I was still hesitant, unsure if I was ready to dive back into something that had once caused me so much pain. But there was something in his voice that made me want to listen. It wasn't desperation. It wasn't about rekindling the past. It was about understanding what had gone wrong, acknowledging the mistakes we had made, and figuring out how to move forward without repeating them. We met in person that time. It was awkward, at first. We sat at a small cafe, the same place where we used to go for weekend brunches, back when everything had felt simple and easy. The familiarity of it hit me like a wave, and for a moment, I couldn't shake the flood of memories. The good times. The bad times. The love we had shared and the silence that had taken over after everything fell apart. Sam sat across from me, his face more tired than I remembered, but there was something different in his eyes, something that hadn't been there before. Regret? Maybe. But also a hint of hope, of the possibility that we could find a way to navigate the mess we had made together. I know things between us have been complicated, he started, his voice low and sincere. And I know I'm not asking for things to go back to the way they were, because that's impossible. But I just want a chance. A chance to be better, to be a better person, to be better for you. I listened to him, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the anger or the resentment that had once consumed me. Instead, I felt something else, a quiet understanding. We had both been through a lot. We had both hurt each other in ways that couldn't be undone, but we were standing here now, facing the truth. And that was the first step toward healing. I don't know if we can fix everything, I said softly. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see where we can go from here, even if it means starting over from scratch. He nodded slowly, a small, appreciative smile crossing his face. I'm willing to do that too. I just need you to know. I don't want to hurt you again. I don't want to be the person I was before. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. Not because I thought everything would magically fall into place, but because he was acknowledging the pain, and more importantly, he was willing to grow, to change. It wasn't about expecting perfection. It was about learning to navigate life together with more awareness, more understanding, and more respect. The weeks that followed were still filled with uncertainty. We had our moments, of course. There were times when the past came rushing back, when old fears crept in. But we communicated. We talked through the tough moments instead of running from them. We learned how to trust each other again, slowly, carefully, but steadily. And that's what made the difference. I didn't know what the future held for us. Maybe we would find our way back to something beautiful, or maybe we would part ways again, knowing that we had tried. But I was no longer afraid of either outcome. I had learned to stand on my own 2 feet, to embrace the lessons the pain had taught me. I had learned that moving forward didn't mean forgetting the past, it meant taking those lessons and using them to build something stronger, something better. Sam and I, we were both different people now. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough.